Hello all, welcome to another endgame study of the Solving Harder Studies to Improve Chess Calculation series. This one comes from the famous Tigran Gorgiev, one of the best chess composers ever. It's more or less a simple position with fewer pieces, nevertheless, this is hard. As always, I suggest you watch the study guide so you are better prepared to extract the benefits from the practice. And if you have already done that, you already know that countdown will start. It will be the main countdown, 10 minutes. And after that, I will catch you up with the start of the solution. And here we are. Let's go with the first right move, which is 93. Brilliant one. If you haven't found it yet, I believe that you are still clueless about why this is the only proper move. Okay, so this requires us to analyze a lot on the beginning of the position, because the first thing we see is, of course, we have bishop and knight and a pawn, which is winning against a sole bishop. But first, and the first thing that is obvious is the bishop is threatening to take the knight, and if we exchange, then we remain with a bishop and a pawn. But because our pawn is promoting in the dark square, then black king just needs to go to the corner as the bishop is in a different color, so it won't be able to win and it will be a draw. So bishop and pawn, with the pawn promoting in the opposite color of the bishop, it's a draw. So we already know that we are going to need to move the knight somewhere. The other problem we have is we can't afford also to lose the pawn and play bishop and knight against bishop. That will be also a draw. And the king is very close to the pawn. And besides that, we have another problem. Both our pieces, the king is not able to reach the pawn fast, and the knight is in the worst possible solution to protect the pawn, because it needs at least three moves. Let's say, for example, one, two, and three moves before being able to protect the pawn. And so this is art as a start. What are then the techniques possible with so many possibilities just on the first move? So one technique, very simple, that we have used already in previous studies, and I have talked, I think, several times already. It's when we look at these positions, also look at the possibilities from the black side. So place yourself in your opponent's shoes. So what is black game? Of course, if it can exchange the bishop, it will be easy, but of course we need to count that the knight will move away. And so the other possibility is to grab the pawn. So moving the king to h5 is a serious threat from black. So black wants to grab the pawn that it's going to be hard to protect. But the king can't go directly. If the king goes to h5, then our king can go to f1, attacking the bishop. So we'll win the bishop because it will be a discovered check. So from black perspective, it's very easy to see that the plan is it will be to grab the pawn, but we need to take care about these discovered checks. And of course, black has one easy way to deal with it. It advances the pawn, so sacrificing it, forcing the bishop to take the pawn, and as soon as the bishop is in c2, we have moved the bishop away from the dangerous diagonal, and we are able to approach the pawn and grab it in the following move. So this is very hard. How can white now deal with this threat of course, we need to count that the pawn will advance and the king will approach the pawn. How can white deal with it? And the first thing we need to see is, okay, we also can give the pawn away. So let's assume the king takes the pawn. If we are able to place the knight in a position where we can fork both the king and the bishop, and so at least with the threat, we are going to be able to win one tempo with that. So let's say, for example, this path is possible because we are going to win one tempo. Let's see that in action. Let's see, for example, if we go with knight e4 with this plan. Of course, the first thing black will do is to sacrifice the pawn, so moving the bishop away from the dangerous diagonal, and now attacks the pawn. Now white to play again, so we need to use the threat, so we go to g5. Notice that now we are threatening to play knight f3 and grab the bishop in the situation that the king accepts the pawn. But of course, black can't accept the pawn and moves the bishop away, moves the bishop for b6. And now we have the king attacking the pawn, so we are forced to protect it again. But now black just attacks it with the bishop, and so we have two pieces, and whatever move now white does, let's say, for example, moves the king, whatever, the pawn will be lost, and so I am playing for a draw over it. So the hardest part was to understand what's going on the position. And now we have more possibilities for the knight. We already saw that knight e4 doesn't work. Let's see what happens if I go with the knight h3, so attacking the bishop while at the same time having access to the same squares that we saw on the line with knight e4. Well, the problem here is, again, the bishop sacrifices because we have this tempo. Notice that it's a sacrifice that we need to accept. Otherwise, either the pawn promotes to a queen or takes the bishop. Of course, it will take the bishop if the bishop won't take the pawn. And so this is forced, and only now black will move. Of course, black can go to b6, but this would be a blunder. We are going to see this because this is going to happen during the main line. So I'm not going to cover why it's a blunder now. So for a starter, let's see another option. And the correct one is to go with bishop h2. So we are threatened to go g3 and grab the pawn, which forces the king to stop that. So now the king attacks the pawn. So now we are threatening to take the pawn, which forces white to play that maneuver of going to, in this situation, g5 to threat the fork. Notice that now if the king accepts the pawn, I simply check it. And okay, it looks like the king is protecting the bishop, but sorry for that, it's checkmate from the bishop. So the king can't accept the pawn, but now, of course, moves the bishop away. The knight protects the pawn. Of course, black can't go directly to attack the pawn because this would otherwise allow the king to come close. So the best here is first to go with knight g4. Notice that the pawn is still attacked if the knight moves away. So what can white do? Let's say, for example, it threatens the discover check, but this is not an option because we still can't move the knight. Otherwise, black takes the pawn, and of course now it's game over. Whatever I do, I will grab the pawn, so it will be a draw from here. And this was the line where the knight went to h3 attacking directly. So let's go on with our main line. After all, here we are. And so again, we are going to see the pawn sacrifice. So the bishop takes. Now the king threatens to take the pawn, and it's white to move. And we already know the basis that what we are searching for. And you have 1 minute to find next move for white. And here we are. And of course, we already know that we need to reach one square that forks the bishop and the pawn, so we are able to protect the pawn. And so probably you went with the knight e5. But this doesn't work. Why? Because I simply can, of course, go with the bishop to b6. Now I need to protect the pawn. There's only one way, and the bishop goes again to d8, and uh-oh, we are in the same problem again. The pawn is lost, and this is a draw. So if this doesn't work, what else have I in the menu? And this is the right continuation. We go with 91. So the same thing goes. I am threatening to fork it if the king accepts the pawn. So the bishop goes to b6. Now, of course, the king, the knight needs to protect the pawn. And this is the key move of going through e1. We are not going to use f3 to protect the pawn. We are going to g2. Now the bishop attacks the pawn. So we have two pieces attacking the pawn. And so it's white to play. Things are harder. And again, you have 1 minute. If you want, you can pause for more. This is the hardest one. This is the critical moment. And find the only way that white can still go for a win from here. And finally, let's see how white can save the game. It's going to be fun. Playing bishop d1, brilliant move, double exclamation mark. We are threatening a discover check. But how is this working? Let's see what happens in the next move with black. Taking the pawn, of course. What was going on over here? And the secret is to go with the king e3, checking the other king. Notice that the bishop now is attacked and we have the discover check. So the king has only one move to keep protecting the bishop, going to g5. Now we move the king again to f3, so blocking the access to the king, coming again to h5, keeping the bishop protected. And now suddenly things become clear. We give the discover check again, but not allowing the king to move and keeping protecting the bishop, so the king moves away. And then we grab the bishop and win this one. So a brilliant one when white was able to see that, okay, I'm going to lose the pawn, let's deal with it, and found this interesting move of bishop d1, brilliant one to finish the game. Notice that here, after bishop taking the pawn, going directly doesn't work, because then the bishop can just come back before the discover check. So we need to maneuver over here to first deliver the check and block the exit of the bishop. Then we come back to use the same idea, but blocking now the king to move away, and only after we are going to grab the bishop. So from a position where we were completely lost to understand where's the best place for the knight, we found a brilliant solution, and hope you have all the fun in the world with this one. And see you, of course, in future videos. Bye bye.